out by about 20 minutes because I went to bed and then couldn't sleep. I was up for 3 hours. So yeah.
Well, I was on some nonsense on Discord, so it's no worries. I probably should have called here. I probably would have been more productive.
Well, the lessons go in different places, don't they?
Yeah. Did we lose Jim already?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like he disappeared.
Oh, in the world? Oh, that's too bad.
He'll come back.
Well, so what's going on? I'm not using video on myself because I probably look like I feel.
Well,
yeah, I'm just catching up on a few. Well, on what happened yesterday, basically, listening to the pulse and just listening to your chat with Jim.
No, yeah, or Jason with Jason, yeah.
Oh, I'm Jason, yeah, and yeah, fantastic stuff. Yeah, enjoyed it.
Well, I listened to the one on Atlantis with the etching that's in the Sahara.
Yeah.
I've just finished listening to that just half an hour ago.
I was thinking that the actual structure described for Atlantis and drawings is very similar to that structure that's in what was it, the dome in New Mexico, Utah, or wherever it is. Yeah.
Upheaval Dome.
I was just wondering how you would get that structure to form with 3 concentric rings with the channel drilled out the way it's described in some pictures.
It's funny you bring that up. Presumably, okay, so here at the Big Sink Thunderbolt, they didn't appear to do anything directly on it, but they did take one of the stray bolts that formed a C hinge with a crater rim discharge, and then they turned it into a site of worship and kept it. They kept piling dirt on it to keep it extant for a long time. There was never any burials in it, and I believe they kept it extant until 500 BC, 5 or 300, something like that, because they dug a trench in it to see what was in the core, and they found nothing. And so I would say that it's, the fact that these C hinges make a shape that would be replicated by something in the sky meant something to them, that self-similarity. So now you take one of these concentric circle motifs. They may go all the way back to some very ancient event. There were concentric circle motifs. There were some here in Kentucky. And there's one still in the whole Nazca Peru thing.
They're in rock carving as well?
No, they're not. The Nazca one. So both of those were.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there's petroglyphs of the same shapes.
Yes, there is. And so what I would think is that they saw first. They saw what was above, and then they may have come across or witnessed these things and decided to either replicate or shape one. And if they are an advanced culture, you would think that they'd be able to shape one their needs.
Are you aware that the ancient city of Carthage had the same structure?
Yeah.
So
the port didn't go off to the south, though. That's the one problem with Carthage. But
but it still had the same structure, which means it was known in the ancient world, at least.
Oh yeah, no, I have no doubt that.
I think you could perform a pretty good analysis on that Rickard structure. If we basically put it through a fast Fourier transform, you could find out the constituent waves of what the actual contact explosion looked like. We can measure these rims and sills and troughs and put that through a fast Fourier transform, a Fourier transform, and get the component waves, the explosion wave.
You know what I'll do? Go ahead, keep talking. I'm going to pull up the C hinge site. Go ahead.
Yes, and so with this fast Fourier transform, you could then measure how much energy it would take to form this structure, and then from that you've got your electrical charge measurement.
Yeah, but what you would have for this structure to form is a triple ring Birkeland discharge with an implosion mechanism in the center that blows out one side of a channel through all three rings. So it must be a pretty spectacular event when it happens. I mean,
yeah,
that'd be life changing.
Well, if you actually are above ground witnessing it, your lifespan would be rather short. But,
it probably killed everything within a 500-mile radius or something.
Probably anything within the horizon, I would say.
Yeah,
but
the
thing that gets me is if it was three concentric cylinders of a cylinder discharge, there must have been a massive compression to cut through three rings that were fairly wide, because they were talking, I forget how many stator wide they were, but
it's about 30 miles across.
Yeah, that's a lot of rock to chip away in one hit.
Yeah,
and it would have been an explosive outgassing event or something.
Yeah, I don't think it's a single current one like this one on the Preddy and
no.
Went away here. Let me get the share.
But the one that's in the Sahara is definitely showing dual helical spins, like clockwise and an anti-clockwise spin structure that's whacking into the ground. So it's still a cylindrical discharge.
Tell me if this share screen starts to show up for you guys. No, still not.
No, nope. Just got you pulsing. But yeah.
All right.
So I just thought it was, it's interesting, but then you got all those internet rubbish and innuendo about Antarctica and what's buried down under the ice there, the pyramid and all the rest of it. But there's a fair bit of disinformation going there. They definitely looks like there's something there, but the detail about it's being, mythified by all and sundry.
People love to take a small amount of information and turn it into everything. Is this showing up? Is this showing up?
No, not yet. The continent, though, would certainly be big enough to house the sort of civilization that would be required. And if there's been an axial shift in the actual location of the South Pole, it would certainly have been far enough away from the South Pole to not all be covered in ice. You're not having much luck there, mate. It's not happening.
No, it's pissed off, isn't it? I tell you what I'll do. I'll hang it up and I'll come and I'll join back again.
Okay.
And let's see if it might have been that particular session. The problem with modern internet.
Well, it's a software issue as well. It's so well designed that it falls over.
All right.
There it is. It's there now.
There it is. All right. So there we go. Sorry, folks. Right. So this is part one of the addendum 1 for the megafauna extinction paper, which we really haven't gone through on this show at all. But revisiting, basically Pratt's thing is you have these magnetosphere induced in the plasmasphere bolts that in the experiment they look like what's on the left there, and then there's a stellar Z pinch, and they come down, and there are Aboriginal in Africa and in Australia paintings and headdresses that still retain this shape. In fact, recently they did in the Black Panther movie, the Queen had this crown. and then it forms these 56 or 28 or 14 rays that come down, each one 1.75 gigaamps, which is that's impressive. That's fairly impressive. That's Gold's criteria. If it's ferrets, each one, and the whole current is like 7 megaamps. That's still pretty impressive too. So here is the big sink one. It's octagonal. It's pretty much indicating that it's going to be coming from the North Pole of Jupiter as we somehow passed over it. And then some ways away is this sea hinge, and so we went out there. Let's see, it's 20 kilometers away.
Sorry, whereabouts is this?
This is in this county. This is in this county. This is the north side of this county. So I can go visit this. I can go visit the Sea Hinge Mound today if I felt like. I just slip past the hedgerow and just go right on in. The university owns it, and you can actually rent it. So what I'm saying is that the site was a stray bolt with a little burn on the edge here, and then the natives would have maintained it to keep it safe. It isn't as flat and smooth as this all looks, but it's pretty good. It's better than the one that's in Indiana, and it's a little bigger than the one that's in the county next door, the same county where the Matic voyages were settled. So 150 to 250,000 on average of typical lightning, blah blah blah. This is from the other paper. So on the electric view, we actually took that sea hinge and I put it inside of one of those craters. And if you notice here, there's a little edge to the circle down by this red arrow. And wouldn't you know, if you took it and put it in and then you just rotate, you don't change the aspect ratio, you rotate it, it fits exactly in one of those craters. Unfortunately, this crater is a pond now, so there's no walking in the center of it to do any kind of measurement. But so we went out there, we gridded the Sea Hinge Mound, and this is something that we can't easily do with Rachette because it's just so large. Maybe an airplane one day, could map it this way if they added, electromagnetism to the LiDAR process. And so we went out there, and you notice that the mouth is in the B6 range here. Right? So bear that in mind.
Why is it twisted? Why is the grid twisted?
Oh, just to keep it kind of flat and going through the center. I could have used a different arrangement if I felt like that wouldn't have mattered. So what happened? What we would do is we would walk along and then take a measurement at each node.
So what's the orientation of the opening?
That faces towards the big sink thunderbolt, which is going from there is southwest.
Southwest.
And there's a creek as usual right next to it.
Well, the weird thing is what sort of a discharge mechanism would cause the hole? That's the thing that's got me.
One of those 56 beams, and then it must have gone astray, and then zzz.
It's almost like there's an ejection trail happening out of it.
Now, so the magnetic or the electric field here was pretty interesting. This is using the tri-field. We figure there must be some kind of water flow happening here in the H row coming actually back out, like coming from here and then going down towards the creek. We think that there's a spring or something, but so the tri-field wasn't as interesting. I mean, the magnetics was pretty interesting because you had here an obvious increase in the magnetic field as you go in towards the mound. And so you can basically see the inside of the mound. But then using the what's that daggone device called, the IOD40, that was recommended to me by Michael Claridge from Sapphire. And so when you put it on negative charge, yeah, I mean, you definitely see something happening at the entrance. And that's what you feel too. When you walk in it, you feel that energy. And then same thing when you put it on positive charge, it's even stronger. Then I just took the scale of it and put it in through an antenna simulator, and for a circulating current. And yeah, there you go, 700 milliamps. Now the question is, could they have known that this would happen and they made the sea hinge? I don't think so. I give the natives credit for the trigonometry and the astronomy, but I'm not going to go so far as to say that they knew that if they piled the dirt into a circle and then left out a section, that it would create this effect.
I think what you might have is a natural event, for sure.
Yeah,
but
that's why.
If you understand what's really going on in this discharge process, you might be actually able to do it when you wanted. But
is there different mineralization in the middle or anything like that of the?
There were some flat stones in the center for apparently, and they're gone now, but the archaeology noted them, and we think that it was for some kind of ritual sacrifice, not necessarily anything nefarious like heart ripping, but just typical animal sacrifice to the sun god, And so probably the site dates according to them, to in its deepest antiquity, would be after the Exodus event. So it wouldn't go all the way back into the Jovian era. So my thinking is that it did go back to the Jovian era originally, and then they had to restore it. And that every time that there was a major event or change in the sky, they would get religion again, just like any other people, normal people. And they would come along and restore the site, because it's clearly been restored a few times. And indeed, it has been restored to this day. So unfortunately, these effects can't be perfect because it's still dirt, right? So there's erosion and things going on.
So they haven't done any core underneath it?
They have. They dug a trench. They dug a trench all the way through from the outside. It actually from the northeast here through to the almost the center of the mound.
But they haven't done on the entranceway. They haven't done any drilling along that line, have they?
That I know of. Now look at on screen here. You notice this row of karst formations on the opposite side of the road on the farm, and there's the burial mound, as Wilson and Blackett predicted. A mile would be a little closer to these karst formations, but a mile and a half. That's pretty close to what they said would happen, based on the religions of the Celtic. But you see, so Wilson and them
from that circle of from that discharge location to the west, you've got another circular, well, not quite circular, structure. You've moved the page on.
I mean, there's going to be.
So I'm just wondering on that where you've got two.
These farmers, they destroyed a lot of stuff. So who knows how many of these sea hinges actually existed around the Big Sink in various directions.
But I've seen a number of them in your ancient Kentucky, in that ancient Kentucky book. There are a lot of structures like that, aren't there? Circular structures. There must be 20 or 30 that I've seen on existing maps.
But with this structure, if there's another depression close by, I'm wondering if it's a dual discharge mechanism and you get an arcing between the two locations.
I mean, look here, right above this. Look right above this line, midway or 2/3 of the wave, from the sea hinge to the Big Sink, and there's a kind of a weird circular. But I mean, it looks fluvial to me. That doesn't mean that it couldn't have been something. I don't know.
Yeah, but if it's raining material due to evacuation, like if you're sculpting one section, it's going to drop somewhere, and it would make sense that if it comes from the source and over to the other discharge location. But,
since we're on here, there is a part 3 of this paper that never gets covered on any of the shows, and it's actually covering someone else's paper. So this is kind of important. And this is the paper. This is a great paper. So we'll open it up. But what I do is I step back through the Enuma Elish, and then I cite the paper. It does talk about it, Antarctica here, and talking about the mega flooding that was happening. I like this paper that he does because it goes through the different flood levels that would have happened. 350 meters. Notice there when this this is geology based, right? So this actually this mega tsunami happened based on the data that Mr. Harris is looking at. And when it did, it still didn't wash over the Dagon Reshat. So it still didn't go over across. It did inundate Tunisia. And so this water could have easily, and if you look here on the right on page 23, could have washed over and come pouring out the other side. But,
I wrote a novel 11 years ago now, where I described a polar impact of a double asteroid onto Antarctica. So the first one fractures the ice and the second one melts it. And in the story, I said that the wave would take 24 hours to hit the North Pole, and pretty much anything in the road would just get washed out. So it would race over the Australian continent and New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. They'd be all underwater. Most of Africa, it would travel a fair distance up Africa. I don't know what it had. Everything south of the Himalayas, of course, would be pretty much trashed. And it would race up the east coast of the Americas. You know, the only things that would be standing in the road maybe are the mountains if they're high enough. But I said the water would take about 24 hours to reach the North Pole. And I don't know how accurate that would be, but I'm basing the wave pulse to be, you know, sort of certainly close to being supersonic, you know, if not close above the speed of sound, awfully close to it. But yeah. But my colleague says that if all the ice down there melted, we're talking, I think he said 161, no, yeah, 161 meter sea level rise.
all right. So here is the paper, Sinking of Atlantis by Marduk. He's got the date. He's very specific on the date. I would only assume that's from combining the myth with the geological dating. It's obviously a fairly dense paper. But we'll try and get to the.
Also, I'd like to point out that Mercator was in possession of maps of Antarctica in 1536, and there was no ice on these maps. So now, where has all this ice come from? And wouldn't we have a much lower sea level?
That's exactly. Look at the point of this. The ice, and people don't know this because they just listen to the media narrative about climate change, blah blah blah. But the ice on the north side of Antarctica is less than 1,000 years old. So it's as the south side melts, the north side is thickening, and that of course is inconvenient for their narrative. But anyways, so he shows here in this figure 4 that there was an inundation that came in. Now he reckons Atlantis was up here, which is, I don't think, correct. But there might have been a more landmass. There certainly was Doggerland here, and gosh, I always forget which sea. Which sea is that?
That's the
North Sea.
North Sea, yeah.
North Sea, yeah. And then it washed. He's saying that there's evidence that there's a rata that has washed straight across Europe and then fell down into the what is that? That's the Black Sea there, and then broke through the Bosporus Strait. And that this is the source of many of the destruction myths. Which is interesting because the size that he's talking about, it certainly would have been absolutely devastating to the
Well,
entire.
I heard the supposition that a chunk of Norway slid off and caused a tsunami, and that hit the east coast of Britain and
Well, I mean,
almost reached the Pennines. It reached the
he's
Pennines.
he's picking a vector that comes from that Greenland strike, which I think is interesting to do. But yet, maybe there were more than one. Certainly in the
Well,
in the Timaeus Critias, the Egyptian priest says very specifically that there were multiple deluges and multiple floods and multiple destructions. So,
well, you had an asteroid or a sort of impact event across from the Americas into Northern Europe and now down into the Middle East. And at the time that this is supposed to have occurred, you've got a massive ice sheet in the North America and across the north part of Europe. So, there could have been a massive melt that occurred because the Lawrence Seaway, for example, was gouged out by a huge water release. So there's I don't disagree that there've been heaps of different events, but what the causes of those flood events are, I think we've got to be a bit careful.
Yeah. That's the thing is when you have an exploding star, you can melt a lot of things pretty quickly. You can drop a lot of material suddenly on the ground. You can uplift or blast away water. There's so many ways to create these mega tsunamis that we now know of. I mean, the landslides could easily occur if you're buckling the crust.
If you listen to the story correctly in Genesis, and it's predating Sumerian story, you got the fountains of the earth gushing out water, and that would that's a good description of a massive tsunami of style event. But you've got the waters of the heavens rain down as well. So if you've got a massive
left side, when we touch the left side of Vinci, we brushed up against those rings, which I reckon the rings. Now I've been thinking about it, and I put this in the new paper that the rings probably formed as a result when Venus ejected, and so it took material from the core out with it, and then was just gathered back by because we know that they're not going to be there forever and they're temporary. So the question is, where did they come from? They've never answered that.
The quantity of water in those rings is staggering because it's being added to by one of the moons that's chucking away water. But the other thing is the icing events that occurred for the planet. If the planet is actually moving with away from its stellar warmth and sort of going off into the dark, as it were, as it transitions between its orbits, those events they'll reduce the amount of energy input through electrical discharge for sure. So the Earth won't be as star-like as it might have been, but the planet will suffer a massive cooling event as well because there's less energy coming into the planet. So, and the oceans are, huge thermal sink as well. The amount of energy it takes to keep water liquid and all the rest of it and to boil it is quite significant.
So here we have also he's showing here the wave when it would have hit the Bosporus Strait. I mean, think about the effect on these cultures. They were already as we know, because they're mountainous cultures, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of superstition, there's a lot of worship of the gods, and now you have absolute destruction. If people were living in the bottoms of these, because the so-called Straits of Gibraltar or Pillars of Heracles were not yet burst open, imagine the sudden, flooding event as it comes through the Aegean Sea and into the Mediterranean. I mean, it would be it would certainly be a memorable event. And if Athens was, as the Egyptian priest said, really actually a more ancient city than anything in Egypt at the time, then the question is, what happened? Why did it become a new city again? Well, this guy is providing a vector for this. I mean, this washing straight, and it's rushing right towards Athens, and you got to wonder what encouraged people to go and invade Troy. And I certainly don't think it was a maiden. I think that it was dire straits at this time. I mean, the disruption to people's lifestyle.
This wash of water would have carried huge quantities of sediment. So, not only would have flooded it, it would have buried underwater whatever was there.
Yeah, it would have been hard living for a long time, which would explain what the Egyptian priest is saying when he says that you Greeks, you Hellenes don't know anything because you always forget every destruction that comes through, you forget. And then he goes into the flood marking on top of the literally on the Great Pyramid. Giving heights. He's got some maths. So I mean, it's a really fascinating paper. I reckon it's pretty underrated. I've never seen it on any of the podcasts. I've never seen it talked about by Jimmy or Matt at Ancient Architects. I like this map particularly because it shows some of the height that this would have brought in. So if we have a La Palma situation, we have kind of a precedent for looking at, because they've actually gone and looked at where some of these chevrons, then the highest order, what he's calling plowed field marks, and their flood limits here. And it reminds me of Dr. Vogt's theory about the coal fields being on, certain sides of the Appalachians and the Rockies from the dumping material.
It's instant burial of forests, and I think the whole, the speed at which oil deposits form and coal deposits form, I think their numbers are wrong, time-wise. And if the oil's falling out of the sky,
that seems very, very likely.
Yeah.
Falling out of the sky.
Just south of my town, there's sort of like these. It's sandy, very sandy, for about 5 or 10 miles, and in that sand deposits are it's oily, and the story is that it's this sand was washed up by the ice flows that came down Morecambe Bay, but it seems that doesn't account for all the oil in it. And this is just right under the farmer's field. Basically, you've got 6 inches of turf, and then you got 6 inches of turf, and then maybe 4 foot of brown earth, and then sand for 200 feet full of oil. Where's all that oil?
The weird thing for the Australian coalfield basin around Sydney, so that Sydney, if you go to Newcastle and to Wollongong, so Newcastle's above Sydney to the north and Newcastle's to the south, and you go out as far as Lisco to the west, you've got a huge basin. And the interesting thing about that coal deposit is the quantity of sandstone involved above and below the coal.
Yeah.
So
here's a map that I found interesting for those who are fans of the Amazonian Atlantis theory. There's not many. Probably more people are interested in the Amazonian golden city, so-called, and I have an improvement for that hypothesis that involves Michigan copper and ancient trade routes, because of the evidence of that links Kentucky with the Amazonian dark earths. But if people are fans of the possibility of this so-called lost continent actually just being South America, because that has been postulated before, you could see what this mega tsunami would have done to the interior of the Amazon. Would have been quite destructive, and would have enabled quite a bit of exploration after, of course, the rotting, because it'd be a mess at first. And then they would have been able to come in and settle and shape the Amazon. We do know now that a lot of the Amazon was man influenced, man shaped. So if people are interested in that theory, obviously right now, Jimmy's got so many people in the alt stream talking about the Sahara. And that's why I do call it the Atlantean period, because, we don't, we can't eliminate the possibilities of other civilizations being involved. And then there's this bibliography. So this is a great paper. I'll put a link to this one in the episode description because I think it's a really good paper. I'll put one in the chat for you guys too. I always want more people to talk about it, and it just doesn't seem to happen. Morning, Andy.
Yeah, he's got his mic switched off. Okay. The really interesting thing about the sites, the possible sites, is that there are a large number of alternates available. And
in fact, here's one in the south of Spain, and look at it would have been devastated too. So
yeah. So all I'm going to say is that maybe, if we look at, say, an empire of recent past, so let's say it's the British Empire was the Atlantean equivalent, they would have had colony sites all over the world, and some of them would have been, if there were multiple flood events and disasters, some of them would have gone away before others. So you get a confused story about where Atlantis was and all the myths about it. So it could have been, located. There could have been colonies located in different locations, and you might spot evidence in different places, but they're trying to find what's the one that meets the story that was given to us by Solon. And one of the things that I can't get past is the claim that the Atlantis was at the center of the world oceans. And there's only one location that meets that need, and that's Antarctica, because it literally is it's at the bottom of the Atlantic, Pacific.
Well, that's relative to the people's perspective. It's sort of like the Noah debate, right? People say, well, the water couldn't have possibly covered the entire Earth up to the height of Mount Everest, but that's not what the story says. It was their world, and their entire world being covered over is really just when you see flooding as far as the eye can see, because these people don't know where the entire thing is.
But if you got let's say you get a displacement of the crust, the water in the ocean is just going to literally walk right over every continent. It'll bury them. But the thing that with the Ark, we know where it landed, which is at Ararat in modern Turkey, on the border there, Armenia or wherever it is. But that area could have been a huge lake that took a long time to drain.
I mean, don't you think this right here, the Azorian Plateau is a little on the nose for the description?
Well, the Sargasso Sea would make it, but yeah, but there are large areas on the world where the land masses have sunk because the destruction of one of I forget whether it's Mu or Lemuria. It was basically a volcanic continent. It just actually blew itself to bits and disappeared.
The thing is, there may have actually been two. I mean, there certainly was Zealandia. All right, we already know about that one. You can even see the remnants of it in this here, and we know about Sundaland. You can see it. But there may have been a continent of Mu. Going from Tamil Massif down around here, but there are some pretty deep trenches too. And then the Easter Islanders over here, they maintain that there was a continent that's sank over here, but it could have just been a very long island, based on what we're seeing here. It's
further north than the.
It's
just there off west of Ecuador, basically.
Isn't that the Galapagos? Let's see here. You could be correct. I think this is Galapagos, isn't it? Yeah, this is Galapagos. I'm pretty sure that their island is down yonder. Let's see.
Yeah, they say the seabed's only 180 million years old, don't they? There's no older rock apparently.
There's no a lot of these things assumptions, There's and you got to be careful with assumptions. They're not that reliable. And when we're getting into dating, for example, carbon dating, there's an assumption that nothing has occurred in the environment to raise radioactive material levels in globally around the world.
See, look here, just like the Azores, the Easter Island is riding that Pacific rift. Yeah, so that's going to be a huge problem when for the people living there when these changes. I mean, this thing could have gone all the way over here. What's
that's the claim for
the French Polynesia. It could have gone then all the way over to near here, which would explain why people share DNA similarities from New Zealand to Western South Africa, and then it could have gone all the way up to here. You know, well, we won't know if they.
But
won't
the interesting thing, if you go down into some of these locations, like go to Western Australia, southwest edge of Western Australia, and zoom in off the southeast edge and go right in, you'll start to see lines, and eventually you'll start to see what looks like city blocks. And yeah, you got to wonder whether there's a buried city sitting in here. There's some weird stuff. Some of these ocean floor stuff.
There are. I think almost certainly there are buried villages and cities. I mean, there's buried villages off of Florida.
Yeah, but these are dead straight lines.
Calling them Atlantis is a stretch, but there certainly could be Atlantean age.
Yeah, but there's a lot of undersea structure you
don't know that. This area right here,
squares and things like that.
Known. I mean, they're definitely buried. They know this. There's buried civilizations in Sunderland, and they now have admitted it, probably reluctantly, but they've admitted it because the way that the sea level rose, they couldn't avoid it. Now they'll deny till the end of the time, I think, and that there could have been something in Doggerland. You know, they're never going to admit that. They only recently admitted that they, you know, High Brazil was real. Friesland, they are pretty much on board with now. They understand that this was above water. There's just too much. There's too much in the myths. And I figure that the fate of Iceland is going to be that of the Azorians. You know, eventually it's going to also sink beneath the waves. But I mean, just based on what the myths actually say, we know it can't be the Rishat. But that I just think that the Azores is the most on the nose, and it's, you know, it's very inconvenient because it's 6,000 feet under the water. You need to get James Cameron on it. These people who think it's in the Bahamas always makes me laugh because it's just like, just want to go to the Bahamas and scuba dive, you know.
Go to the bottom of South America. Go to the bottom of South America.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at that.
Notice that circular feature at the edge there to the east. That is either a volcano or a bollard style. That whole blister is a volcano or electrical discharge mechanism. One of the two.
Yeah, you know, no one ever talks about this feature. It's since I was a child, it fascinated me because the typical explanation of Pangea splitting, you know, how they do it, never accounts for this.
But there's at least 3 circular craters in that structure. There's the one on the east, one in the middle, and one on the west.
Is there an airport on the Sandwich Islands?
I don't know about Sandwich Islands, but you're close to the Falklands, and there's an airport there.
Well, yeah, but still, you know,
1,000 mile.
Yeah, that's not a hop skip over to go and visit these volcanic islands here.
Yeah.
Now, what are those islands called?
It's not giving an indication here. Let's see, the Central Islands.
Wow.
No one ever talks about these. I don't care what show you're on. No, no one ever talks.
And if you go to Kenya, between Kenya and Madagascar.
Okay, hold on a second.
You zoom in.
We know. I do want to mention that we know that there is
a circular. You see, Madagascar's north coast is actually circular, but there's an island called Mayonet, and it's the central volcano of a huge, massive super volcano under it.
And this is a sunken land for people who are watching this Mauritius. This is, so we have, that's a sunken continent as well. Now, does it connect all the way up? They deny that. But I think that the evidence with as far as lemurs is concerned is probably that yes, it probably did at some point connect up. And once again, what do we see? A rift valley. Something has opened up and swallowed these things. There is one more down here. It's in my paper, the Unboxing Atlantis. Let's see. It is right around here. Yes. This is a known, but it sank a long time ago. Like Zealandia, it sank before the Atlantean thing. But this Mauritius, it could have been very recent. And certainly the Tamil of India maintained that it definitely existed, that Lemuria was here. I mean, it could have very well gone across the Maldives over to Mauritius. But so you're alleging that this Mayet is sitting over top of a huge
that there's that from Madagascar to Kenya and all in a big circle. That's actually a volcano, a huge volcano. There's just a few of them poking up. It's like Yellowstone in a sense, but much larger. And there's active volcanoes sitting on the top of it. There's a whole bunch of them. I forget how many there are. But that was the one they were worried about 4 years ago because of the massive seismic tremor that occurred in that location. They thought it was going to explode. And if it did, you would have, if it went off the way they fear, it would be a hyper eruption. It wouldn't last very long, but it would blast literally. The rock would end up in space. And it's above, and above it is water. That would flash boil, instant flash boil. So it'd be the biggest explosion you could. Krakatoa was a bad news one, but this one would be way worse.
Yeah, I mean, especially what if they were electrically connected volcanic events? Then you have energy being pumped into the volcano as it's reaching its crescendo of activity, rather than only relying on a subduction plate. I mean, I reckon that there's a lot of energy going in when as this plate subducts. However, that's going to generate certainly quite a bit of charge separation through friction, plus the kinetic energy. But if a Birkeland current was connecting in this region, powering up the entire region, that might explain why the Rift Valley. They even say it's accelerating. If I remember correctly, that this plate it's not just splitting, but it's actually getting it's not accelerating in a way that should frighten humans, but it's certainly getting faster in the way it's separating.
Yeah, it's breaking off from the African plate, isn't it?
It's true in Ethiopia is where the
which is interesting because it's not that it's not that far away from so many rift valleys, and then on the other side of the world the fastest splitting rift valley is over here in the Pacific plate. And some of the material is as young as 10,000 years they've measured here, and none of it is over 1 million years old. This entire Pacific crust is very young. The oldest crust in the world that I've ever heard of is here, right in this area. I forget exactly where, but it's supposedly 3.8 billion years old, which makes you wonder, why did they ever come up with 4.5 billion years?
Well, Greenland is supposed to have old deposits, as is Australia.
I'm sure it does.
The Drakensberg Range in South Africa is very old as well. Oldest rocks in the world, I think.
But again,
Zimbabwe.
You've got dating mechanisms that make the assumption that the radioactive ratio of isotopes hasn't changed in 4.5 billion years.
But we know now that it has.
When we've got events that can drop radioactive material anywhere on the planet, so that the assumption doesn't work. And then you got mythology that describes nuclear war. So it's just I think it's
Well, again, I mean, I'm not going to go with nuclear war. I don't think that you can get nukes that are of the size of energy possible without destroying most of the life on Earth. But
I didn't say that they were going to be, causing massive Earth reconfigurations, but if you get dirty nuclear weapons going off, you're definitely going to raise general background fallout.
look at how this nor'easter naturally appears on the and look at how it circulates. And so you have an electrical vortex just captured by pure incidence, looks like, right over the Labrador Sea. So we can zoom out and boom.
Some of the weather patterns you get, particularly in the region you're talking about right now, which is from the Bermuda Triangle to Greenland, in that area. If you get a weather cover, you'll get hexagonal shaped cloud-free areas all over it. And these hexagonal formations appear to be a hydrogen formation process.
And look here, there's something happening too over.
This is current weather, though, isn't it? Or is it?
Oh no, these will be satellite images,
Yeah, it's absolutely slashing it down.
But yeah, so I've seen cloud cover that have hexagonal empty spaces. So I think the water molecule is critical for the low pressure system. And
that reminds me that we did one time. This is fascinating because everybody knows that hurricanes, they get their strength here in the Gulf of Mexico, and then they lose it as they go over land, right? Yeah. So one of the hurricanes, I can't remember the name of it, but it was several years ago, came up, and of course by now it's a tropical depression. It got to Kentucky, and when it got here, it formed an eye in the center right over where I'm at. And it was there just briefly, and then the system completely dissipated and broke up. So it followed along the Mississippi here and stayed strong enough. And then when it got up here and came to dump rain, it made another eye in the storm. And if I'd have been writing papers, I would have taken a screenshot of that and put it in a paper just by itself. But it blew my mind, because it's not something that's supposed to happen.
Yeah, but the strange weather events. There's been a cyclonic event that was actually an anticyclone that was more devastating than the cyclone. But I suspect that water is critical for a low pressure system because it's electrically in the center of the molecule. It's electrically negative and the outside's positive, so it creates a clockwise rotation in the southern hemisphere and an anti-clockwise in the north. But the high pressure system, I think, is probably due to carbon dioxide, where the polarity of the molecule is actually expressed in the opposite direction. So the center of the molecule is positive and the outside, the two oxygen atoms, are negative. So instead of creating a low pressure system, if there's a concentration of carbon dioxide, it's a high pressure system that develops. But those systems are electrical. And I don't know of any other sorts of, sulfur dioxide is probably another one that would be like carbon dioxide as well. So there'd be molecules that are happier with a high pressure rotation system, and other ones that are happy to produce the low pressure. So molecules that are similar to water in terms of polarity of charge go to low pressure systems, and the reverse produces high. Well, that's what I think. I don't know whether anybody's got hard data to show that. It's just a suspicion I have. I'd love to know the concentrations of carbon compounds and sulfur compounds and similar, to show whether that's true or not. Because
I don't know where you could get that data, really.
Yeah, but the idea that it's high pressure and low pressure, hot and cold, is It's not really the full story.
No, I agree. We don't seem to, we don't. Are there any maps of the current charge of the planet or anything like that? Is there any data that anywhere in that kind of stores that sort of information?
Well, the only thing available is putting that sort of sensor data as a rocket goes up through it.
We do have the Earth gravity maps, which
all right, yeah,
might be somewhat indicative of what's going on. Because what I find interesting about these Earth gravity anomalies is they do not match the sensical explanation about gravity, right? So if there's more, let's see, is this one high res? Let's see, let's try and find a really high res one.
The thing that got me was that the gravity over water is larger than it is over land.
Right. That's exactly. So he's getting where I'm going with this. So take a look. All right. So you have places where there's definitely more material, and there's no extra gravity. Look at the Rockies. Look at the Himalayas. And then you have places where there's a dearth of material, and there's just extreme amounts of gravity. So this happens on Mars too. So you have places on Mars where there's been a burnout. Electricity has carved out a crater, and it'll have more. It'll even saturate the device, whatever they call it, gravitometer, I guess. And then the volcanoes, which are huge structures, having less gravity. No one talks about this. This is one of those things that they don't want you to talk. It's sort of like a Biden failing Afghanistan situation. Nobody's allowed to talk about it for some reason. Or that name. What was that name? Eric Ciaramella, right? Suddenly we're not allowed to say a specific name. Well, you're not allowed to talk about gravity anomalies because it goes against their basic concept of how gravity should be working.
If you overlaid that map onto the map of the seabed, I wonder if there's any correspondence. If you look kind of west of Ireland, there's a kind of a large area that which is a high gravity area, supposedly. And would that correspond with some kind of Atlantis island? Because it probably looks big enough, doesn't it?
Well, but it's west of Friesland, because Friesland is about where this little orange one is here.
Yeah, it's bang in the middle of Ireland,
right
and Greenland.
In the rift, right? It's definitely in the rift. It's definitely
weird.
So there's a lot of electrical activity happening along that rift. It's very magnetically or magma active.
Iceland's right on top of that rift. Yeah.
And you got north of Australia across New Guinea into Borneo. Solomon Islands at one end, all the way across to Borneo on the other side. But
yeah, that's the old Mual Lemuria, isn't it?
This sort of maps the reason why I can't say whether gravity is a feature of itself or whether it's something that's a side effect of electromagnetics. I can't. I'm on the fence on this one.
Well, this is why eventually I need to write that paper of mechanics, Newton's mechanics and kinetics in EPMC, because we need to bridge the gap and discover, because gravity does obviously relate to acceleration and there's mechanical processes happening, but then also there are these clear indications that it's charge related, and the equations are uncannily the same.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do about that?
But the bit that I've got confused is the area under India there.
Right.
Is low, and that's over water mostly. And if water is supposed to have a higher charge and therefore increase the gravity field as a result, why is it low over that water base, but in the Atlantic off Britain and over some land and water mass north of Australia, it's high? These things don't make sense. And why
It'd
you
be a
got
good
all the
place to set
base
rockets
spots,
off from, wouldn't it?
why have you
Spaceships
got
off
all
from
those
there.
light spots either side of the United States and above Canada, you know, across Canada? It's just strange locations. But you don't have a full globe to say what the story is with Antarctica.
There we go. Oh, this
So
one's got.
Dan Winter's got some interesting theories. Oh, I don't know that he doesn't call them theories on gravity. And I should find the video and post it with the bit from where he talks about it. And now, from memory, he views it as it's to do with a wavelength and hydrogen is from memory, and that fractal stuff he talks about. So you remember a while back, Robert, you were talking about Victor, the
Schwarzenegger.
Austrian fella. Yep. But you see, he's very big on that vortex system that he was involved with, and basically his thing for it is you get the Planck length and you multiply it by the golden ratio, and he's got all sorts of things he talks about with it. But that was, I'll have to find the video and just put underneath it what minute mark it's from where he's talking about it, because he also said someone asked him about Tesla, and his view was, again, well, his view was that some of the experiments Tesla was doing, he was actually creating earthquakes with.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and he had a reason for that. You know, and like I thought, dude, it'd be interesting to see him and Thornhill sitting in the same room.
Yeah, but you know, Victor's now well and truly dead. He died in 55.
No, not so much Victor. I was thinking about.
But in one of those videos where he's talking, there's an Australian researcher that got into Victor Schwarzenegger, and he built a Thomson thunder machine, the one that duplicates lightning. And what he did was he got very thin needle, so he just attaches these things to a dual pipe. So just ordinary water pressure out of the tap goes into a split, and then comes down into literally, you know, the really thin needles like the ones you use for diabetes. That sort of thin needle, and then he's got two copper rings that are, 4 copper rings, and 2 of them are joined with a copper thing, and he's encased them in paraffin. And this thing creates the electrical charge mechanism. And the really interesting thing is when this stuff gets going, the water literally follows field lines, an electromagnetic field line structure, and it's called a static lightning machine, but you know, water's moving, and it's just falling that causes this charge to build up, so that although they talk about it being a static electrical system, it's not actually static at all. It's dynamic. But he's talking about, you know, the spark gaps given the distance, which is probably about half an inch or 3/4 of an inch thick. The spark distance is talking 40,000 volts. You know, it's not the sort of thing you want to be touching. And that's just from 2 very narrow water spits. Yeah. The ones that they show on the internet where they just got 2, you know, effectively hose drizzles, that doesn't have anywhere near the impact that this really thin water stream produces. So when you look at charge in storm systems and tornadoes and the like, the charge build-up levels are huge, and it doesn't take much to trigger them off. But I think some of these lightning events, certainly from the ionosphere to the surface, there's a discharge mechanism happening there. But I think they can also be, you know, much deeper sourced in the solar system. But you know, modern cosmology and modern Earth scientists don't want to admit that stuff until they see film evidence. You know, earthquake lights, they don't exist because you haven't seen a picture of it. And forget the fact that somebody as reliable has witnessed it, or the ball lightning events. And there was one of the shows that they did on the UFO Project Blue Book, a more recent one, where they had an airline pilot chasing some ball of light. If he'd been involved with a ball lightning event, it would have explained the damage done to the aircraft. But you know, the way it's explained in the television series is, you know, you think, well, if they're getting science advice from physicists, they don't know what they're talking about, really. There are other ways.
Schauberger as well. He was doing an experiment with sound waves, ultrasound, and firing it through water, and it was creating an explosion at a particular frequency, and it was giving off as much light energy as
so many luminescent
the sun. And I think Schauberger was trying to harness this effect in his cavitation motors.
Yeah, that's another.
Yeah, well, that's what
nuclear fusion in that process, just from compressing.
Yeah,
yeah, fusion from compression. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, our understanding of what the natural processes are, what's possible, I think is just very, very, very badly done. You know, I think a lot of people who would claim to be experts with their PhDs need to go back to basic high school and start over. They're not that clever, really.
Be a nice one to experiment with that. A little bit of ultrasound and water, see what you can do.
Yeah, but you know, you will get an explosion, that's for sure. Essentially,
what I brought up on screen here is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. So the audience, I mean, you know, we live in the age of don't believe your lying eyes, but I mean, tell me if there isn't something strange going on here. You have obviously centered here. I've centered one particular crater with the gravity anomaly, and then you've got a crater off to the southeast of that, which is suddenly missing more gravity than everywhere else. But just to the north of the hotspot, we'll call it.
Where's this? Sorry,
this is Mars.
Right.
Right, and so here,
lovely green up there.
There's a precipitous drop in the amount of gravity that doesn't seem, you know, to necessarily be related to elevation, and this tells me that there's some kind of electrical event that's been happening. You got, again, okay, you do have you know, some more gravity in this what looks to be some kind of mountain, but then an extremely low amount of gravity in this one crater as compared to all the other craters. And to me, there's something odd about this this situation.
If you went to the top of a high gravity hill and sat off a railway carriage going down it, and could you get all the way to a low gravity, and would it keep on pulling you down that way?
I'm not so sure.
BHP had that happen 18 months ago. Didn't they, Rob? They had 20,000 ton. Well, it was about 20,000 ton, and ended up finding a set of points to tip it all over it.
Runaway train, yeah. But there was another one that was more recent in the goldfields. Crashed train as well, which got out of control. And they can't explain why the train got out of control.
But the one in the goldfields.
How are they measuring this gravity?
They must some kind of gravitometer on a satellite. But you know, there was a high variability I noticed between a couple of the Earth maps. Look here. You know, according to this, the gravity is as high all the way to the west of Europe, which would lead some sociologists to conclude that Europe had a gravity advantage. And then, you know, off to the east there of Sumatra, you have an even larger region of high gravity than was on the other map. I do find it interesting that there is a higher amount of gravity here between Antarctica and Africa, because that, like I say, not far from here is one of the sunken continents. But it just looks, I mean, that map matches this one, but the one that we were first using, there's a little bit more. I wonder if some of it's changing, is my point.
So that could also be friction.
Maybe I don't know. I just don't. I don't think that we know enough.
How do gravitometers
I
work?
agree.
How do we take differences in gravity?
Well, if they're not a mechanical device, they've got electromagnetics involved. So you could be measuring variation in the electromagnetic field structure. It's like the LIGO experiment.
There was an image. Hold on. High precision borehole gravitometer. I doubt that that's exactly what they're using on the satellites, but let's take a look here.
Oh yeah, they'd have to be well made to survive launch, wouldn't they?
Full size image. Oh, that's the full size. Okay, well, we'll just have to.
You can zoom in on
it. Dewar bottle, gear reducer, soft silk driving motor, coil spring, constant temperature, more silk, capacitance sensor. Okay, there you go. So that's precisely what Robert was saying.
So they're measuring the capacitance of the Earth, are they?
Yeah. Well, no, I think they're measuring the change in the capacitance between the plates.
I see. I see.
Launching that on a spaceship would be a little bit, interesting to stop the spring from being totally buggered.
Yeah. I'm thinking that that's not how they do it on the spaceship, but let's see. Here's
be nice to have one of those. Go around checking out gravity fluctuations.
Open the image in a new tab here.
I mean, there must be opportunities for making some kind of motor from high gravity to low. I mean, I suppose it'd be a great place to set off rockets from a low gravity place. I suppose you've got a boost, an energy boost.
But if they're
using springs and lasers here.
If gravity is an electromagnetic side effect, then all you should be able to have to do, and this has been proven in experiments, is change the electrical charge of the object you want to fly up to space. It's not hard to make those electrostatic lifters. They're pretty simple to make.
Yeah, that's good.
And there's been experiments done by various groups, like university students and the naval guy who played around with bolts, magnets, wire, and plywood, and got the damn thing to float in the air. And of course, because
look at this. Look at this that came up. So they got here a salt dome, and the gravity profile. So this is in some kind of paper. Let's pull this up. This is purely by Google search accident. Looks like there's something similar happening here. Well, look at that. That's amazing.
There's less gravity where the salt is. Does that say?
That's what these papers seem to be implying. And these so happen to be related to our Rishat and Upheaval Dome and Higgs Dome here. We're interested in. So are they really claiming that it's that because of the less limestone? Because I'm not sure. Let's see here. I mean, I could be wrong here. So salt density is limestone density. Let's see if
low gravity at salt domes. Amazing.
Let's see here. Do I have salt on here? It doesn't have salt. Is limestone on here? Let's even come up.
Gravity density of salt. Just might actually have it in all.
There's a rock salt and limestone. So yeah, look at there. Salt is more dense on average than limestone.
So why is the gravity going down?
Yeah. Well, gee, I wonder. Probably because it's ionic.
Well, maybe because it hasn't got much water in it. Who knows?
Well, maybe the limestone.
Yeah, yeah.
There's something not quite right here.
Geodesy.
Oh my. Yeah, that's
There's
a
lots
good
of
one.
claims. There's lots of claims, but do they really have the right answer? And
Probably not.
if you've got higher density, then gravity should be higher at that location. But they say they find minerals using gravity densiometer meters, but I don't think that's the case at all. What I think they use is the electromagnetic field intensifiers, because you get, metal detectors work for a reason, and you tune them to find the things that you want. The only difference between the handheld metal detectors and the ones they haul behind aircraft to do maps of the world, looking for their mineral deposits.
Hang on, where'd it go? Seem to have lost my image search that I had. Let's see.
Either go backwards or go to history.
Would a salt dome affect the electrical charge
Yes.
locally?
Yes, absolutely. It's ionic.
Definitely, without a doubt. Water will affect it because it's dielectric, effectively. Salt is a conductor.
Yep.
All you need is, even carbon will affect it because, depending on what's in the molecules with carbon, you can get electrical if it's graphite, it's definitely a conductor.
So we were looking at this. There was another. Well, shoot, it's going.
So I wonder what gravity readings around coal deposits are like.
Hold on, let me.
Yeah, because a lot of coal's fairly high in sulfur and salts and things.
Yeah, but it's full of carbon, which means that carbon's a conductor under the right conditions.
Mm-hmm.
We got here. What's the Faro deposit? Is it?
So maybe that picture of Mars is showing big salt deposits where you've got high gravity places.
Yeah, they could be the equivalent of an upheaval dome. All right, so let's see, gravity anomalies.
What about gravity? What about gravity and coal?
That's what I'm looking up.
Oh.
Come on now. Let's see here. Crustal structure. Load. Not coming up as well, we could look at gravity over, say, like Western or Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah, because you have a bit of coal there, haven't you?
Quite low over the state by the look of it.
Let's see if there's
Man, you got low gravity.
this is a gravity map.
Do not jump too high, Nick. You'll end up in space.
Yeah, I might try that one of these days. Can we have a zoom into that US one? That looks great. You can see the Appalachians picked out. That's where the coal is.
The west and the east. Is that a gravity map?
Yeah. So
okay. So along the Appalachian chain, you got an increase.
It looks like, but the coal fields are strongest. Now here's interesting. Look here at the bottom of Kentucky, where I always am talking about the Daniel Boone ley line. Dense gravity changes from the Big South Fork going down to Tennessee, the Big South Fork up towards the dome, and it looks like it makes a spiky point that goes right into the center of the Denisovan Dome. And whereas there is a low point in those Lichtenberg knobs, but the coal fields don't appear to have any kind of extra. But there is something happening in the Blue Ridge, east of the Blue Ridge line, which would mean to me that again, if there were mega tsunamis, they're to dump material on that side. But this is very strange because I mean, this is all Appalachians here. I mean, this is all from northern Georgia all the way up through Pennsylvania here.
Over at Wyoming and the states to the east.
Yeah, it's all flat, and so there shouldn't be.
Yellowstone is, got bugger all in it, and then you got all the way around it. It's all high density, and then in the Gulf, you got these circular formations.
Yeah, look at that heavy gravity with a nothing in the middle, right at the bottom of the picture.
If it was due to extra material, you would think that it would be. And then look over here where the Sierras are. The Sierra Nevadas are a low gravity zone. That makes 0 sense according to standard model.
But where are the oil rigs? Where are the oil rigs in the Gulf? Are they around that circular? Where
there's some there. There's also some that are just outside of Louisiana. You can, when you're on the coast of Louisiana, you can actually look out.
Effect in Texas.
Yeah, that could be related. It'd be interesting to have an exact overlay of the oil fields on top of the gravity anomalies here. Certainly, that high gravity region in the Big South Fork, there's both coal and oil and natural gas deposits all throughout that ley line. And in fact, the Cherokee myths were that there were gaseous vents on fire constantly down in that region when the pioneers came. So this is fascinating because you've got definitely more material in east of Kentucky than the west. The west, I mean, the New Madrid Fault there is just all sorts of extra gravity. But I'm interested in these veins of high gravity going up and down, that they're crossing rivers. They're not obeying any kind of mountain. There's no mountain chains in Iowa and Nebraska. There's nothing there. So what is that?
Then you got the stuff in the North and South Dakotas.
Yeah. Well, and it's all, look at the MCR here is going up there towards the Michigan deposits. I think we might be onto something here because there's not a lot of rhyme or reason for this.
Well, it's certainly not due to, lots of rock, for sure.
No, because this region called IB up here, where they've identified an escarpment of gravity. I mean, that's all mountain. I've driven through that. That's all mountains.
Nice. Where are we getting this data? Where is it coming from? Because I'd like to have a look at some more of these maps.
ResearchGate here. It was this guy, National Geodetic Survey.
Right.
I mean, that's a good source. Isostatic residual gravity. 2002. I don't have any reason to
just go back and re-explain things to me anyway. It's just they got something wrong.
Yeah, of course they have, but but the geologists don't talk to the astronomers. Why should they?
No. Geologists,
astronomers have their heads in the proverbial clouds, and the geologists are busy trying to figure out why none of their stuff makes sense. And it's understandable. And eventually they're coming around to it. I mean, if what Ben says is any indication of anything, which that take that with a grain of salt. But if they're right, I mean, it was the astrophysical, the AGU that put out the Birkeland current text, right? The electric currents in geospace and beyond. I mean, so theoretically, there are geologists who are starting to pick up on the electrical nature of things. I don't think, though, that they're ready to fully explore electrogeology, but it'll only be a matter of time before they see Billy Elverton's videos.
And Michael Steinbecker.
Yeah, and but unfortunately, I mean, he was mostly out in the field, whereas Jacob Gable and Yelverton are, in the lab, and David at Electric Universe Eyes. But more of the first two, they're actually doing it and showing the video footage. I mean, here, look, the Rockies have a gravity, a dearth of gravity. This makes no sense according to a standard
The
model.
Rockies are to the west, aren't they? Nevada and but
Look
look
at
at what's
that.
happening in Florida.
That makes no sense according to their theory. I mean, the Appalachians are just a kind of average.
And up the Mississippi Valley, what the hell's going on here? And you got in the Midwest, you got nothing, and on the west coast, there's a tiny bit off Washington and Oregon.
Yeah, maybe that's a fault. Maybe going up Puget Sound.
Well, the Mississippi Valley is supposed to be a fault line, isn't it? Up the Mississippi.
So there is the New Madrid fault here, but there's no major fault line going through.
And there's a fault line. There's a fault line near Washington too, isn't it?
Miami. It's not there.
Yeah.
The Yellowstone. Yellowstone is out of place in terms of the sort of thing that should be going on.
Yeah, I mean, again, if gravity was related to the amount of material, there's something wrong with this picture. Now, it could be that what's happening underneath the crust far exceeds in importance, but then there's these correlations. There are correlations here with surface features I'm noticing. Again, the Blue Ridge Mountains. Now, the Blue Ridge Mountains have dome features that are a lot like what are out in Yellowstone or Yosemite. And Stone Mountain is down here in just northeast of Atlanta. Of course, you guys know about Stone Mountain, right? I mean, it's like Ayers Rock. You guys know about that?
Yeah, you showed us that one night.
Yeah.
Not everyone might have seen it.
Let's look at the politics. Yeah. It's got to be it has a teardrop shape. And what's important about it is the teardrop shape goes up into the northeast. Let's see if we can find an orthogonal. As if it was, either the end or the beginning of activity. You can see how it sticks out. I mean, it just doesn't have anything to do with Appalachia at all. There's a kind of a view. And there are these other features along the Blue Ridge. I mean, they're totally out of nowhere. They do not. There's multiple ones too. This is just the biggest one, and it has the same feature that the trailing, and they call it volcanic. They say it's basalt, but I don't necessarily think that this kind of granite has to be volcanic. It's quite famous as a destination to go. Again, you see that there's the height of the anode, and then it has this trail off to the side.
This is so that you guys know that my colleague has got a lot of understanding of geology, and I was having stand up, at the top of your voice arguments about how mountain ranges could form with granite deposits and all the rest of it from a fall of material out of the atmosphere onto the ground. And we had these arguments for days on end until I said, under what conditions did these minerals that you're claiming are formed deep underground, what's required to actually form the minerals? Do they have to be underground? Can they be above ground? And if we're talking electrical discharges that go on for hours and days, you could build the Himalayas and the Rocky Mountain chain with an appropriate discharge mechanism.
Okay.
It would rain the mountain out of the sky along with oil deposits and everything else that goes with it.
All right, I want to point out here. This is going to the heart of our point. Look here in the map of Virginia where the Blue Ridge Mountains themselves are. Daggone it. Okay, so you can see, there's Washington, D.C. along the Potomac, and then there's the cut. This V will be our cut, where Maryland cuts down in, and basically what happens is you leave Washington, D.C., and then you enter onto the Blue Ridge Parkway, and you head towards Shenandoah National Park. Very famous. Lots of presidents have been to Shenandoah. And it goes down through, past Lexington, Virginia. Okay, now, when we look at the other map, all of the gravity anomaly is happening to the east of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The Blue Ridge Mountains, because there's the V. Okay. Mountains should be coming straight out of that. Now you can't say that it's not related though, because it's following the mountain, but it's happening east of it.
On the lowlands.
And there's something happening down there in Florida too.
And the gravity thing up the Mississippi there, that's all lowlands.
Well, there's some, but Alabama definitely has more mountains. Mississippi is much lower elevation. Yeah, there's their explanation, as far as I'm concerned, there's no correlation with reality. So they, either their equipment is faulty or their assumptions are faulty. I believe the equipment, because the equipment's going to be interacting with the electromagnetic environment.
But I think the data, they're getting data clearly. The understanding of what the data represents, I think, is what's missing.
Yes, 100%. 100%. There is, again, this is uncanny. It should be absolutely following the high density of gravity should be following what is really actually this yellow edge between the two. It's almost as if, there, as it slopes down, because there's nothing, it goes to plains and lowlands east of the Blue Ridge mountains, right? This is settling.
In the Midwest, right in the gravity map, that in the Midwest where you got all that blue,
that's Rockies.
I thought the Rockies were further west.
No, so the Rockies start basically just when you are 2/3 of the way across Colorado. That's sort of where they start, and then you go through the Rockies, and then there's the Rockies kind of dip down, and you end up in the Great Basin. But so there's definitely not enough gravity happening for these to be the Rockies, according to their theory. And the same thing over here, the Sierra Nevadas. There's Lake Tahoe's at the bend, and then you're headed down towards Yosemite. And then this is Sacramento Valley. Why is there more gravity in the Sacramento Valley than there is in the Sierra Nevadas? That makes zero sense.
Salt plains, salt flats.
And the whole of Nevada.
Very well could be all about the salt. Which would again go back to the ionics.
I'm just wondering, that's a dirt-covered salt depression that was previously water, like a filled-in sea underneath.
The problem is, I guess they probably don't have enough resolution on this, but I don't know. But somewhere in Utah here would be the upheaval dome, the salt dome, and I'm not seeing any rise. And then also the Great Salt Lake, right? The Great Salt Lake, there should be more gravity. That's in the heart of Utah. I don't see. So whatever there is, I'm not going to presume to have the explanation right now. This is amazing me down here at the Big South Fork, because I tell you what, there is also down there is a strange amount of precipitation. It's very predictable. You can watch a map whenever an overcast day is going to happen. Almost always, it could be overcast here. You look, and it's raining down there.
It'd be interesting to overlay this gravitic map with a magnetic map.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a mess around with this as well.
I wonder if there's let's see here, magnetic map, United States, high res. Let's see what we got here. Where do you get everything?
It's good, Rob, isn't it? Having people that you can watch that got really high speed internet.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Just watching this as opposed to being able to do it ourselves because politicians get involved. But anyway,
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that, but it is good watching that.
Let's just do a magnetic world map. See what comes up here. Yeah, nothing.
That's the gravity map again.
Here we go. World Digital Anomaly Magnet. Let's go to that site. That sounds fascinating. Do we get to full resolution map? There's a KMZ for Google Earth. We'll get that. Let's see here. PDF. Let's see PDF.
yeah, no,
No.
it's a global one.
That's going to be too much detail. So what we need to do is really open it up. So give me a second while I do this. Talk amongst yourselves. We'll upload this KMZ file. Dun, dun, dun. I'll put a link to this in the description as well.
So we're getting.
I don't know.
So this is why you don't want people who haven't studied geology going on about this sort of stuff. Hey, it upsets the it upsets the apple cart.
Well, they get and play around on the internet and start looking at things.
Why? Dismiss this. Why isn't it loading?
It's
I
probably
could
taking.
probably upload these KMZs onto the worldwide telescope data. That'd be interesting.
I wonder why it is not loading. Because
Too much data, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, usually we give an error for that. Oh, it's only got one. Oh, that's why. So something wrong with the KMZ file, maybe.
So when we're looking about geologic structure, you got to look at the gravity, the magnetics, and the other one that's missing, of course, is the electrical field structure.
Conductivity.
Yeah. Well, also the electric charge area, because for the area of the world that I'm in, there's a magnetic south anomaly to the southeast of the town, and it hardly ever rains here, and it's always a low pressure system above us. Well, pretty much most of the time, but I'm just wondering whether the fact that we don't have the right field environment is the reason why we've got low rainfall. It'd be interesting to compare other areas like the California environment and the Mediterranean environment. You've got a sea surrounding all the country, well, touching the countries, and hardly any rain or low rainfall around it. And you would have thought that wouldn't happen that way. Whereas the amount of rain that hits Europe, for example, particularly England and Ireland, is quite high.
We have to use Google Earth installation. So give me a second. I have to.
That?
You can't just use Google Maps, and that's a different kind of KMZ file here.
Stick it in.
But you're probably right, Rob, with a lot of those. Because I was watching and seeing these people I thought I'd follow a bit, and they're walking around through Carnarvon Gorge, and you look at the formations there and you go, that's all been layered, that.
Yep, and it's a problem because we've got geology is based on assumptions of the 1700s, where they're trying to understand things back then without the data. and those assumptions haven't been examined.
But no.
And,
You know, they'd
and
probably say, oh, it's like that because it may have once been underwater.
well,
And you'd have to say, yeah, but then it could also be because it was a point where from a fallout somewhere else, that's where it was captured and laid back down.
well, why the ocean base sculpted around the edges? You know, you go out on the continental shelf, and then suddenly it goes from, you know, a couple of 100 meters of depth to thousands of meters of depth.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make a hell of a lot of geological explanation. You know, why the ocean base so deep.
When was this last update? This is just not working with anything new. I'm wondering if this isn't for Google Earth from a long time ago.
Might be. It is.
Let's see here. There's an yeah, so the paper's missing. I mean, this may be old. Okay. Well, for brevity of time, we'll just take a look here. See what we can see in the zoom in. It's a mess. It's really a mess.
Yeah, it's showing the striations due to the polar arrangement.
And you know, it does look though. Okay, here's the East Coast. There, okay, yeah. So you can see there is a purple feature. There is a magnetic anomaly along the same vector. You see that? You see what I'm talking about? Let's see if I can mark anything on here. Not sure that there's any marking features on this. Present document programs?
No.
No, that's not gonna be. We'll zoom in here where we can. You see what I'm talking about? So there's the coast. You can see that black line, that's the coast. And there is a magnetic anomaly going from the Chesapeake Bay down towards Tennessee. And then there is something that matches the Columbia, the Cumberlands. And interesting though, looks like to me though, Mississippi is rather weak in the magnetic department. And it looks like it's hard. Well, there's the Great Lakes going across. So Yellowstone looks like it has kind of a hole of magnetism around it too. Hard to tell. Without the underlying state lines on there, and you're looking off to the side, and this is all. What do they call this kind of map? It's
look at the area and the Gulf and the Yucatan. You know, it's just very strange stuff.
Anyway, gents, I'm gonna pull the pin. Catch us later.
Okay.
Cheers on it. Cheers on it.
This looks like an incomplete map that's in here.
Yeah, well, they clearly couldn't. You know, they didn't get all of the world. It's very difficult. They must have done it by plane.
The weird bit is the Amazon basin too. There's nothing in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia where the oil deposits are. Or, yeah.
I see here. Yeah. I mean, they're avoiding inhospitable places. Yeah, we got to get a better. Let's see here. Maybe this is a better data set. Google Earth. When was this updated? And this looks like a newer website. And it's called the eMag 2. So theoretically, this is the better. We have an interactive map, and then let's download the CamZ file. We'll download both of those. Okay, so they have done us a favor and they put it into a map. That's nice. Google Earth would be kind of a nice addition, though. Okay. So the area we were particularly studying was the gravity anomaly. So again, look at that. It's overlaying with the gravity anomaly very well.
Yeah, but it's on the mountain range. It's to the west of the.
No, the mountain range is west of that
No,
by
yeah, right,
a little
yeah.
bit.
It's lining up on the
The gravity anomaly. Yeah, it's lining up exactly on the gravity anomaly.
that.
Because the mountain range, we'll use regular Google Earth here. People can see. The mountain range is closer to the western edge of Virginia. It's partly what defines historically, you know, the people in West Virginia didn't want to participate in the Civil War. They wanted to stay out. They wanted to be part of the Union. And the mountains kind of define that because the people in the mountains didn't really have slaves. It wasn't the kind of lifestyle they could afford. So that they're saying that the anomaly is happening over here from Fredericksburg down towards Danville. There's the border. And now
So
if we look,
if the gravity and the magnetic overlays are mapping on top of each other,
they very well could be. And not having anything to do with there being a specific mountain range. That's a paper right there. Only I had time to write it. What I'll do is I'll put these links
but
in the
implication
description.
that's going on here, if these two overlay, the gravity and the magnetic anomalies overlay on each other, then our understanding of gravity is a magnetic effect. And that would apply to the entire solar system.
Very well, could be, but I've often taken their gravity maps of Laniakea and the superclusters, and you know, in motion to be actually polar activity and not specifically gravity, because of the motion that they demonstrate in those animations doesn't seem to follow a specific direct vector, and any kind of, you know, warped space-time argument doesn't make much sense when you're talking about an area that doesn't have hardly any mass in it, and yet it's bending the pathways of these galaxies as they head towards the Great Attractor.
Yeah, but that can be ionic lensing as well. It doesn't have plasma lensing. You know, the claim that it's gravitational lensing is, I think, a bit stretched. You can get lensing from balls of plasma gases and not so plasma, well, gas that's neutral but hot and things like this. We forget optics, the simple Newtonian optics.
Yes. But my point is, okay, let's see here. It'd be nice to find the Great Attractor. Yeah, let's get it in a GIF file here. There we go. Well, maybe. Sometimes they're not animated GIF files. It's surprising how hard it's gotten to actually find some of these after they've come out. It's like, why is it getting harder to locate some of these moving? That's why I love the original Electric Universe Gateway that I had, because I could store all this stuff and it would be easily searchable. I'm just very sad that it's going away. It was much easier to use than the current site. The current site's easy to build, but as far as actually a catalog of information that's quickly searchable, you know, very, of course, Web 1.0. Okay, well, we'll just have to go with the current one. So my point is, here you have low amounts of material in some of these regions, and they're being pulled in a way that they're indicating, it's not me, the mainstream is indicating that there is a bend happening, and then what they're doing is they're blaming it on the bend of space-time. But where is their origin mechanism for the bend in space-time? This is so why suddenly they come out with these articles claiming that there's black holes everywhere, because they find, and this is what people don't know, they've actually said, oh, there could be even more than one black hole inside of our solar system. Why are they saying these kinds of nonsense things? It's because they're observing curvature inside of our solar system, and they're wondering where it's coming from. So they're speculating that there's some hidden mass floating around the daggone solar system.
Yeah, but all it has to be is a ball of plasma that bends light.
Of course. But
if my knowledge is correct, I've been
no idea why they make these speculations, because it's a complete bunk.
Yeah, but there's a black hole within about 12 light years. Well, depending on how you measure it, it's either 8 light years or 12 light years from the Earth. And the sun is apparently orbiting that particular structure, So, yeah, a black hole 12 light years away is a lot closer than what standard cosmology talks about.
Man, I'm trying to find.
It's close. That's closer than trying to remember general distances. It's Sirius is 66 light years away.
Yeah, it's in between Sirius and us, apparently, is it, this black hole?
I don't know where it is, but I thought that the Earth, the Sun, Alpha Centauri, and a few other star systems are actually part of a cluster that are orbiting a larger structure, and I was told that that was correct.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So you got the chimney thing, the stellar chimney that's been described. So there's a lot of claims going on that are just whoever's peer reviewing these papers is incompetent. And, they're not reading the material.
Well, yeah, I would reckon that would be definitely true.
If you can, well, I forget the number, but I think it was in the range of 600 papers were generated by an AI or a computer thing and published as real papers, and not all of them have been retracted. It was done as a university experiment to prove that peer review wasn't worth the effort.
Now, here we go. So here's a couple of it. Interesting. So this is them describing the bend of space-time here, but they've overlaid their torus.
This is looking awfully like Nassim Haran's video animations with his double torus mechanism.
But okay, that's all fine, but except for the part where it doesn't actually fit what's happening in the background. That's what I find really funny. And then again, we have these attractors and repellers and all sorts of material in between, and supposedly the material wants to go around the material, right? This material wants to repel and go around the Laniakea. That doesn't jive with the explanation of gravity, either with relativity or Newton.
Yeah, but you notice the word dipole repeller.
Yeah. They know. I swear to God, they really know. It's just what they put out in the press releases that drives Wall Thornhill crazy, because it's almost like they're winking at it. It kind of reminds me of the New World Order, right? They're constantly releasing stuff as kind of a wink, where's this word Omicron coming from? I reckon it probably is just rearrangement of the word moronic.
Well, Omicron is a Greek word, so yeah.
I know, but why are they choosing it? Right? It didn't come right after Delta or Echo. Where'd they get to?
That was a good question. Why'd they skip 2 letters in the alphabet?
I swear it's all tongue in cheek. It's sort of
I think maybe they're waiting for Prince Philip to reincarnate.
Well, what happened with the lambda version of the? We've got the alpha, beta, and Delta version. What happened to the lambda version, and what happened to the beta version.
So look here. This is what I'm on about. This is a great animation. I'll be sure to include it too. But what is this material supposedly going around?
Well,
what would be the mechanism? They don't have a mechanism explained here. There are these filaments. These are clearly filaments.
The issue I've got,
gravity explanation is not going to work.
How come they got such, filled in data? How long have they been looking at these structures?
Yeah, I think, my hypothesis in the charged dark matter paper was that they know, and they're just trying to make the switch in a way that doesn't embarrass them, and that they don't have to go back and redo every museum and because they've been pumping our heads full of the propaganda my entire life, at least. I remember when I was a kid, the movie Black Hole would come on TV, and they've been telling us this nonsense for 50 plus years. And in the background, in the government facilities, they were doing their particle splitting, and they were doing plasma experiments, and they're starting to go, oh, maybe we misunderstood what was important here. And I think they know. I mean, there's no way you could look at this map and go, well, this makes sense according to gravity. It doesn't matter whether you use space-time or you use Newton's concept of mass attracting. That's not what is happening here.
What I'm going to say?
Lines of motion are going around the material.
Why we've got this rubbish that claims to be science is because understanding this correctly means you get to build your ET vehicle type things. Your UFOs, craft that can do
that is looking to be like the most. Look at here. I mean, what is this filament going all the way out here for? What is the purpose of that? Like that is not a gravity. That is not gravity. They're saying one thing, and they're really describing completely different things.
If you've got secret technology that's giving
anti-flow.
You mass.
Does anybody know what the word anti-flow is supposed to mean?
Yeah, it's got two types of flow. It's just direction.
Oh, okay. I see. You're
so there's a positive direction and a negative direction. So there's flow and anti-flow.
You're thinking they were talking about a dark version.
No.
The flow you can't see.
But I think the reason why we get this crap is you got military technology that is going to give you massive advantage, and the easiest way to hide it and send everybody on the wrong direction is to make up bullshit and promote it. It's like Russia was sent broke because Ronald Reagan got out there and said, we're going to build Star Wars in space. And, the Russians fell for it. And the Soviet Union went crunch because they didn't have the economic capacity to compete.
Yeah.
And I reckon
the United States still went and built that and said that they couldn't because it was too hard, but I don't believe that for a minute. I believe that they built it.
But you got this attractor and this repulsor, and I just think this is made up.
It could be completely made up. However, what would be curious is why would you make it up? If you're going to make it up and falsify the data, why would you then go and falsify your paradigm? Because this attractor repeller relationship falsifies Big Bang and falsifies the gravity, mainstream gravity. We've already done in this show a great service to humanity. We've shown that gravity has nothing to do with the amount of material, and it might have something to do with magnetic anomalies.
But the weird thing is, doesn't this look like a biological shape?
It does, 100%, 100%. Yeah, and we the salt. Of course, they already knew about the salt connection, but probably not understanding necessarily why. Yes, it does. It does look like a living organism. See the magnetic fields. Clearly, these are magnetic. The material is following magnetic fields.
Yeah.
Well, electromagnetic fields.
Well, the electricity is what's flowing, and it's following the magnetic
material.
And then they're generating each other. So as the electricity flows, it's generating magnetic fields. The magnetic fields are helping to carry the electricity.
Yeah, but what's flowing is matter. It's not. Anyway.
Right. Well, but it's still electrical because it's charged.
Yeah. That's my point. Is that the only sort of matter we know about is electric and magnetic at the same time.
Well, I reckon that they have not got it together as to what is actually happening. When I see things like in the crater, and then more importantly that one with the hot spot, and it as here's another one having more gravity than the other craters around it. I just don't think that they have an understanding of what they're looking at. And they may publish and circulate papers in their own personal, what they give out to space.com and Nature News and phys.org is not too far off from Nazi kind of propaganda. I mean, it's just outright lies in a lot of cases.
Well, wasn't it NASA never a straight answer and JPL just plain lies? It's sort of like they're involved in military projects as well as civilians, and NASA is a defense organization. It's not they claim it's civilian, but it actually isn't. It's set up under the Defense Act. So it's you gotta question the point, the versions.
Well, you had all the Nazi scientists working for them, didn't they? Basically.
Well,
Bob Brown.
Is Michael DeSala true about the first man on the moon in modern age? Was he a real German in the 42-43 period? And the Americans took a little while to catch up. It's sort of like, what's the real story?
Yeah.
No, we may never know, or maybe we'll know really soon.
I don't think the Nazis got to the moon in 43. They had just developed the first.
I'm gonna hit the stop.
The first
like new discussions. So I'm gonna hit the stop.